Hello, Dr. Bechtel again here. This is part 2 of the chapter in family law covering the compilation of a family history. And this one goes into communication skills, and we'll also go into the checklist, the kind of areas that we gather information from for a case that's a family law case. So we're going to look at communication skills first, and we need to just keep in mind all of the most essential points to communication when we're dealing with the client interview process, and just the overall client support process. Our communication skills are so vitally important to make the firm professional, to provide a comfortable and safe place for the client to visit, come in, or whatever. When you're communicating, it's a two-way street. It's not just what you see in that person, but it's what you have in yourself to communicate with. What we have, the types of communication we have, are nonverbal communication. I had mentioned in the previous slide, the previous part 1 of this video set, that we have, we looked at what the client is exhibiting in the posture form, in their body language. I mentioned, are their hands, fisted up because they're nervous? Are they, even verbal communicate? Well, is their face scrunched up? Do they look like a stressed person? Do they look calm? And these can really interfere on communication if you don't take the role of a trusted person, a person that is there, that client who's upset or nervous can trust and be listened to. Everything you can do to bring that person down to, everything's okay, we're going to be all right. So nonverbal communication, you should be reading that by now in your life. And then we're going to talk about active listening, which is so important to show the client that you are listening well. And there are influences of ethnic, racial, and gender differences. We need to be aware of those when we're interviewing a client. For example, I used to assign a client, or my students, haven't done this for a long time, I used to assign them a lesson that they were going to interview a woman from, I think it was from Jamaica. And, I asked them, look into the communication type of that particular ethnic, racial culture, if you will. Hope I'm using the right language. But and they did, and I think they learned from that. I think they did a Google search or something and learned from that some things that told them, some care that needs to be taken in certain areas. You should do that if you know and you can tell. This would be also another difference is abled versus less abled, like disabled. And establish a comfortable interview setting. We'll go into that. And finally, just recognizing that listening really is hard work. All right, let's look first to active listening. Active listening is the process of signaling that you're really listening, signaling in your body language, signaling in your facial expressions. So verbal and nonverbal clues matter in demonstrating to the person you're interviewing that you're actually listening to them. Verbal or nonverbal might be nodding your head up and down, of course, gently, smiling, I call it the Buddha smile, just with a kind-hearted look on your face and that kind of thing. So you're going to be listening, and those are my two favorite, and eye contact. Verbally are things you can say, like even I understand, oh, I see, something that says you heard the words coming out of their mouth, and he goes, do that without interrupting. And then paraphrasing if there's a lull after a question seems to be answered in an open-ended sort of way, you can stop and paraphrase by saying something such as, what I'm hearing now, or what I think I'm hearing is, ... You fill in that blank with what you think you're hearing, and you summarize what you just heard. So maybe it was a 5-minute story that the client told about the spouse has a tendency to hide financial concerns from the client. And they've given 5 minutes of information about little clues that they've had all along. And you might say, what I'm hearing is that you've seen some discrepancies in the bank accounts, and you've seen some money seemingly missing. Whatever you heard in a longer story, try to patch it up in a paraphrased format of, I heard you, and I heard all of those little points, and I'm listening to you. Reflecting the client's feelings. This is something that's I'd like to make sure I do a presentation on sometime soon. When you don't want to adopt the client's feelings. You don't want to be feeling on you instead of for you. So you need to be listening on a for them and to them type of strategy, and not getting assimilated and caught up in the unhealthy feelings that your client is experiencing. I don't mean feelings are normal, but I'm just saying you can get into an unhealthy stage of that conversation if you're not careful about some boundaries between what you're feeling and who you're feeling it for. Reflecting these feelings are words like, I understand, I see, I feel, I understand how you might feel, I empathize, I sympathize. Something that explains that their feelings of vulnerability are not abnormal and you're not judging them for them, okay? And when you feel crummy, don't you kind of feel judged when other people are looking at you? They're having a great day, but your ship is sinking today. And you don't want to get too deep into that, but it's just nice when somebody says, I understand how you feel. Or if it's someone you trust and they trust you, it might be, I understand how you feel. I'm here to help. All right. Something you could say, I'm here to make this process easier for you when you're responding to client feelings. Paraphrasing, I went to that a little bit, but here's a little bit more detail. It's a process. It's shortening the format, what the interviewee had just finished saying, and it has some functions. It tells the client you're with him or her, that you're trying to understand what they're saying. I need to change this to APA, they, their, him, hers, not appropriate so much anymore. Crystallizing a client's comments, get those. It's even a concise way of bringing together all of these facts that are sometimes just poured out on you in a kind of a stream of consciousness kind of way. It's taking all of that and not solving the puzzle, but putting the issue together in such a way that it's compacted and probably less threatening, to be honest with you, once you do that. Once people express their whole story, it really helps them. And you compact it and put it together, and here it is, it's just that. They actually will feel better. Checking your own perceptions also comes along here. This is saying, yes, here's what I think I hear you saying. And that person then has an opportunity to say, well, yes, but don't forget, or no, that's not what I'm saying. That's not it at all. And that can happen, depending on how much information you're getting. Asking questions is another way to listen actively. We're going to go into this a little bit more deeply in, I think, the next slide. But open-ended, open questions, they don't have any limits. There are no real boundaries on it. You do have some boundaries as in providing a context of the open question. Of course, the question can't be, so wide open that it doesn't have any meaning to it. client looks at you like, I don't even know what you're asking me to say. Then there are closed questions where we get down to the more short yes or no. We use what is on the next slide called the funnel approach. This is something that stems from the initial areas of interviewing for news. This is something that they use to work on their interview skills. It begins with the broad and open-ended questions. Tell me what happened. Tell me what happened. I mean, there was no context there, but in a family law situation, can you tell me about your when problems first developed, or not when so much, or can you tell me how the problem that came about that caused you to come here today, regarding a dissolution of marriage or divorce, whichever terminology you want to use. And they start answering, and you might be paraphrasing a little bit along the way, not interrupting along the way, but letting them talk, let them get it out. You're taking notes, and that way, with those notes too, often what I would do is I handwrite my notes. I tend to use handwriting, and I could put maybe a little question mark next to something I saw that I need to get a narrower focus on. Maybe I heard something, and then when they're finished, then I know if I can ask that, what I can sum up that narrower focus question. So that's what comes after the broad questions. Excuse me, I forgot to advance the text. So more focused questions come about after the broad opening questions. And then lastly, very specific questions. So we've gotten more narrow, so we're at the top of the pyramid, the funnel. And we have really open questions. We narrow them down a little bit more, and then we're down to very specific questions. Oftentimes, the narrower, more focused questions to the interviewee will sum it all up, and you don't really end up needing to get very specific. But if there are specific places where evidence is located, or if something relevant is showing up that you want to look into further. What bank are you talking about? Is that where your spouse is banking now instead of at the old bank you used to? Or what bank is that? So that's where you get to the more really specific questions. So that's my information about the interviewing skills and communication skills process of the interview. We also, at this interview, want to look into what kind of electronic data we need to know about. There are really two purposes to this, and one is to avail ourselves of information where family members and the spouse, for example, is placing information on social networks. The other reason is to tell the client, the interviewee, shut down your social media for a little while here. We don't want people seeing what you're feeling, hoping, praying, that you're looking for vengeance, like people do. I mean, there's nothing unnatural about that. But again, they use that. There's a little bit of time to find out that information. All right, and then the last topic is a family history checklist topic. This will be fast. It is, we're talking about what type of information we're generally looking for. I'll tell you, a lot of this information is located in usually the client's initial consult questionnaire, which they can be very long in some areas of law. Family law might be, when today's situations, especially with the electronics and stuff. But we'll look for basic information, marital facts. Are there any contracts that they've been involved in? Contracts. That they've been exposed to, or that they've gotten themselves into, even real estate contracts and that sort of thing. Itemized expenses, that's a big one in family law. We get a lot of itemized expenses information from them, so that we can do a financial affidavit if there's a dissolution of marriage and there are children involved. And I think any dissolution has to have an affidavit. I can't remember. I apologize for that. I have to look it up. Do they have any specific health information? That's important. Are there problems that you can't afford? Are there problems that require you to have more service from other people in the family? And maybe you're client is fixing to be all by themselves at, and they have a illness that causes seizures or something. All of this is going to add up in some way if it exists. Does the client have any estate documents prepared, like a will or a trust? What about their questions, about rearing and the custody of children? What kind of you can make questions for the interview out of this. What do you want as far as the children, if there are children? What do you want as far as the ranch house out, in the best part of the most beautiful place in Florida or something like that? What do you want from that? Do you or your spouse have any business interests? Somebody own a partnership, somebody own a business of some kind. Employment history comes about too. Every bit of this, as I read it, I can see this all in the family law context, what we need to know. Education background, how did you or contribute to the other spouse's career enhancement or education, and vice versa. What kind of property, real property, what kind of personal property, are there intangible personal property like stocks and bonds, etc. And insurance, do they have any insurance of any kind? And then lastly, this list, is there other income, and do they have anything pending in the courts or with insurance companies? Did they have to go through Helene and Milton and still not get everything solved? And there's some stuff that's so sad what's happened. Some assets are frequently overlooked by the parties too. And so having a checklist of asset ideas in front of you, and you'll get used to this after repeating the process over and over in other interviews. Liabilities are debts owed. And maybe are there any past bankruptcies or any threat that bankruptcy's been discussed? And tax returns, assets that the children own. It all comes together into a formula in the end. So having this really detailed information, and I think if anything here too, I've been on the side of being involved in an insurance claim and a couple of lawsuits that I've gotten involved in as plaintiff, and I felt very I felt my privacy was so at stake, and all of this information may trouble the client. That you may have situations where they're like, I feel so intruded on. So asking these questions in a way that is professional in tone, and not with each one of them, but maybe when they go through the agenda that I spoke about in the previous slideshow for this one, maybe the agenda conversation. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to ask a lot of questions today. And I assure you, your information that you're going to share is private. I've already mentioned that, and I just working with them in a way that they don't feel judged. And sometimes just that I understand and thank you very much for sharing this is a really good tool. I'll stop there and show you my references again. This is the book from years ago we used in introduction or intro to legal systems, and here's one that we just started using last year in family law. Thank you.